Quick reminder, the Wi-Fi information and the URL for feedback surveys are on your schedule. Please remember you can send an email to safety@DrupalCorn.org. If you have any concerns, if there are any emergencies, please call 911. Thanks for coming to Docker-based Battle Royale today. Please help me welcome Wilbur Ince, developer at Electric Citizen. There we go.
Thank you. All right. How's everybody doing? Last session.
Woo.
Who's happy?
Woo. Yeah. Woo.
Who's sad? It's the last session. No one. Okay. All right. This is the second time I give this talk, so I think it's vastly improved. I'm going to do a little bit direction, but it's still Battle Royale of local development environments. Today I'm going to talk about, well, my name's Wilbur Ince. I'm not a local developer. I'm from the Twin Cities. I'm also a camp organizer for the Twin Cities Drupal Camp. And I'll probably be involved in DrupalCon in 2020, so I hope you can come to our city and enjoy that as well. I'll throw it in right now. Tim Erickson and I are organizing a local event called Twin Cities Open Source CMS Unconference. It's a lot packed in there. Twin Cities, we're interested in doing a little cross-collaboration with people from other CMS, open source CMS projects like WordPress, Joomla. This idea was born out of the Twin Cities Drupal Camp when we had one of the Joomla major contributors giving a presentation, and there was only about 20 of us in the room. So we're just trying to do a little cross-collaboration. It's October 13th in the Twin Cities. It's $13.13. Because that's a prime number. It's on 1013, and that's a prime number. And yeah, so if you can join us, that'll be great. We've done a unconference in 2014, and it was really successful, and we really liked it, and we're interested in repeating that. So, all right. I have two jobs. I work part-time at Electric Citizen. I have a new title. I like to call myself a Drupal mechanic. I'm not a site builder, but when your Drupal site is leaking oil in your garage, or there's a very interesting sound coming out, or the contact page doesn't work, you need somebody that can get in there and kind of look around. And that's what I do at Electric Citizen. I do a lot of support work for the projects that we've already worked on, and also incremental changes. We push those forward. I also work for myself, Wilbur LLC. I like working at Electric Citizen because I get to work on projects that I wouldn't, as an individual developer, get to see and work on, and it makes things very interesting for me. I've been a Drupal user for a long time. That's my Drupal ID number, just because I went out and got it early, I think. So, oops. So, let's talk about Docker-based development, and I'm going to give you the spoiler. I'm not going to tell you which one is the best, but I'm going to give you some information about them, and you can decide which one is going to work best for you. All right? So what do we mean when we talk about local development environment? What we really want to do is, on your local machine, we want to replicate the environment that your web server is running. So we want to get the right operating system, if it's running Apache, which version of MySQL, which version of PHP, the right Drupal modules. We want to get all that stuff right so that when you're working locally and you run into errors, that's the same errors you would see on the server. And so that you can diagnose exactly what's happening. So if we take a look, I borrowed this slide directly from Sean. He was like, yeah, I need some more graphics. So on one side we have the server. We want that to look just like our local machine. So we want to get PHP right, MySQL. We want to have the right version of Drush on there. Plus, when we pull down that server, we want to do some local things, right? Because we're going to be in a work environment rather than a production environment. So we want to have gulp, and we want to have the right version on there. We want to be able to disable caches. We want to have views UI enabled. We want to have field UI enabled, right? Devel module, all those little things, debug, deblog turned on, all those things that we need to kind of make our job easier. That shouldn't be running on our server version for sure, right? So, and then there's local development is difficult, right? I mean, we have SAS, we have Compass. How many people have worked on a website and built it, gone through the Compass compiler, got their code done, and then 6 months later, oh, there's some CSS changes, and you go back and you make some changes in the SAS files, and then you run the compiler, and what happens? In the meantime, Compass got updated, and when you run that compile, it's like it doesn't know what to do. It throws out a bunch of errors, and then you have to guess which version of Compass you have to reinstall on your machine. So this is one of the things that you should, now that you did that, you know better. But you want to be able to lock those in from when you develop the thing, so that when you go back and try and make some quick changes, that you're going to be able to do that. Also, when we talk about working on teams, not everybody's working on your operating system, right? I don't have to say not everybody's working on a Mac. It's your operating system. Are you on a Mac? Are you on a PC? Are you on Windows? Are you a Linux, God forbid, Linux user? I mean, it's nice though, right? That person on the team, you're just like, good luck, have at it. You know what to do. This is your whole life right there. So, who runs Linux on their desktop? Nice, nice. Don't you feel better? There's 5 of us in the room. Where's Tess? That would be 6. Okay, things get complicated, right? Here's one of my favorite sayings from Bruce Coburn. The trouble with normal is it always gets worse. So, do you think the web's going to get more complicated in the future or less complicated? Do you think you're going to have more technology to deal with in the future or less technology? So let's give you some tools to do that. So let's talk a little bit about where we were and where we're going. So in the old days, we had a bunch of tools that people would use depending on which environment you were on, right? LAMP or LAMP stack, XAMPP, the Mac people would use Dev Desktop. You install this stuff locally, right? And it was great because your machine was fast, right? You were in charge of it. You had a project, you could go with it. The problem is that if you had other people on your team, you wanted to onboard them, you have to sit down with them and install these things and go through this and the configuration files. And this is kind of a once-off kind of a thing. You don't do this every month, so when you do have to onboard somebody, it's like, oh yeah, how did I install that? I mean, what version of XAMPP am I using, right? I don't even remember. So, and then if you have multiple clients and hosts, right, it can be really difficult. This does nothing for our version of PHP that we're running, so it's not a very sustainable system. This was a lot easier in the past because remember when PHP didn't change that much. Well, now PHP is every 6 months they're running, and now, right, 5.6 is going away in the near future, and hosts are finally on that, and now, right, we finally got our hosts to go to 7.1, and oh, it's actually 7.2 is the stable release now in PHP. So, how did we handle that? We went to VMs, right? So we just build this thing, and we give it to our team members, and like, here you go, here's the whole thing in the box, right? That's great if you have one project. That's awesome. Give it to everybody, and everybody has it. So it's consistent, but the problem with this approach is that these instances get huge, right? How do we replicate that over multiple projects? And then when we go back, we have to maintain these things. And it's a big project, and you have to update that. So now we've come into the age of Docker. Everybody know about Docker? Should I say anything about that? Anybody not know about Docker? John, raise your hand. So Docker is I should have had Sean's slide. He had a great slide about this. You can look up information about Docker and more about the graphics about that are cool, but what it is, we're building an environment based on containers. So instead of like with a VM where we're having a whole operating system with all those services running within that bucket, now we run each of these containers as a process on our machine, and we string those together, and they give us the emulation of what that web server looks like. It makes our containers, we can switch containers on and off. They're lightweight and they're swappable, so we can go from PHP 7.1 to PHP 7.2 and just download that image and run it. We take what we need and we can add and subtract from what our project that we're working on. These containers are cross-platform, so once you start running Docker on your Windows or your Mac or your Linux machine, these containers just plug right into it. We don't have to worry about versions. And then with Docker, we customize that with config code. So we can just say, okay, let's call this container, let's add this, let's plug it in. And I don't know how they do it, but they do it. You just put in the commands in the YAML file and the thing spits it out. All right? And so now today we're going to talk about Docker-based tools that extend that concept of Docker and make it even easier for us to use. So this is really taking the kind of the tool and like customizing it and putting a wrapper around it. All right? Any questions so far? Yes?
So for Docker as an emulator of a full server environment, would you say that Docker is as good in terms of how it operates? Like, are there any parts that are missing from it that you would get from having the more elaborate full install of this stuff on your machine? Like, will Docker answer the mail for all the stuff you need to do?
You know, let me say a couple things about that. One is that when we talk about building, Docker containers that emulate our development environment, we're not actually running this. We probably are not running the same containers that our server is going to be running. We're going to get really close, right? So if we're on PHP 7.1, that's better than being on 7.2 or 5.6, right? If you need to be that exacting, you can build your own containers that are going to have the exact build that you have on your server. So, and I'm going to, on the next slide, we're going to talk about options, and there's one of them called, I forget the name of it. Anyway, you build your own containers. That's the whole point of the project. Does that answer that? Okay. So, I have a bunch of Docker-based tools. I'm going to demo the ones at the bottom, but let's kind of talk about these. The first one is Flight Deck, and the reason I added it's from Tess up in the Twin Cities, who works with 10.7. It's really a bare bones Docker kind of solution. It's a real lightweight configuration. She gives you an envelope file and a Docker file, a Docker Compose file, and you use that to build your website. I like it because it's really small and really fast, and once you know what you're doing, it's really easy to work with. So that would be maybe the, kind of the easiest do-it-yourself sort of a project. Docker for Drupal has been around for a long time, and it's similar to these other tools, but it's kind of its own ecosystem. I should probably do a demo of that, but I just didn't have time to get that done yet. So they've just had a new release of Docker for Drupal and some updated files, and that's a very actively developed project right now. Does anybody work with that? Yeah? All right. The one I was talking about before was the Lagoon project from Amazy. So that project is really kind of a full system for building your own containers. And I think you can also use those containers then to deploy your code. Is that right?
Was my understanding.
Yeah. So it's a big project. They're a great development shop, and they're actively working on that project as well. The three on the bottom are the kind of the latest and greatest, and really great environments for you to start using Docker. Lando is from Tandem. That's the company that's sort of behind this project. DDev is with Drud, and then Doxil. And Sean can tell us about that, but we'll keep going from there. So with all these projects, you're going to start out with Docker. And this is the part that you have to get through to get to the promised land, right? You're just going to have to go and look at the documentation, install it on your system, get it up and running, and then you're going to be ready to go. They have two versions, the enterprise version and the community edition. I've always used the community edition. Anybody use enterprise? Do you get any bang for your buck with that? The community edition is great. I mean, it does everything you need to. There's no downside to that. All right. So let's talk about some of these quick. As I said, Flight Deck, it's kind of a bare metal Docker. It's built on super lightweight Alpine containers. Tess is a Linux user, and she's DevOps, and it's really a nicely put together package, and it really it works well and it works fast. So cons is that it's easy and light, it's quick, but we don't get some of the additional features that we get with some of these other tools. The scripting tools, you're going to really have to build that kind of stuff out on your own. All right. Docker for Drupal Robust. This is a well-maintained project. They have lots of containers. You can get it for Drupal 6, 7, and 8. You have an environment file and a Docker Compose file. It's not as easy as these tools. It's a little bit DIY, so you really have to get in there and futz around under the hood to make it work well. But it's really a viable solution. So, so let's talk about Lando. All of these tools, right, are layered on top of Drupal. What's nice about these tools is how easy they make it to get in there, and we're going to see that in a minute as I get into these. So one of the big advantages with Lando is that they have recipes, and they have all kinds of recipes. Drupal 6, Drupal 7, Drupal 8, Laravel, what are all some of the other ones? There's just a whole pile of them on their website. They have tight integration with GitHub and Pantheon, so they have some specific commands for pulling and pushing Pantheon code as you're working with projects. So if you're a Pantheon project, it's a pretty great integration for that. The great documentation. I think all these projects, Lando, Doxil, and DDev, have all done a really great job with the documentation. It's if you have a question and you do a Google search, you're always going to go to their documentation page because that's where the answers are. I have some cons listed here. I found that the command line is a little bit glitchy. Sometimes things don't always work well. And problems with Lando and with DDev is that they're slow on the Mac environment, and that's not their fault. That's really issues with the native file system on Mac PCs working with Docker. We'll get back to that. I'll ask Sean that question later. Remember that, Sean.
Okay.
All right. DDev. kind of the same thing. They also have recipes. When I worked with these, I found that this one was the easiest to initialize and get started right away. The init is really good, and it really, like, you go through the script and you're up and running. So also the init file that it produces provides a bunch of documentation. It's not a blank file. So if you're like, oh, I want to do this next thing, there's a bunch of documentation, you can see it. No DNS configuration needed in that initial init, so you're off to the races and going. Again, slow on Mac operating system. Last one is Doxil, and I think the difference, I think this is the reason why it's faster on Mac, is that it installs a VM. Is that right?
We have a VM option.
You have a VM option too. Yep. I think they do it by default.
They do Docker for Mac by default, which the file system for Docker for Mac is kind of slow.
Yep.
So we allow both, but we choose the VM because the VM is somewhat more performant.
Yep. Great. Thank you. The other pro that I really like about Doxil is that you can add on services with the command line script. So you're running a script, update a script to set up your environment, which I think is pretty awesome. And it works great. So you'll see an example of that Vim add-on install PMA that adds a PHP MyAdmin to your project. Just goes out and does the work for you. So, any questions so far? Here's what you came for. Oh, one more thing. I'm gonna just give a shout out to this. I love this tool. What's your name?
Mark.
Mark and I were talking before, like, when you're working with containers, this is a great tool to help you with that. I'll relay why that helps me so much. I work with Electric Citizen and I'm their mechanic. So any day, help tickets can come in from any of our 20 clients that say, I need help on this. And so I need to be able to spin up a development environment for them and be able to look at their site. So in any day, I could work on 4 or 5 different client projects. So I have 20 Electric Citizen projects installed on my machine. I also work with a bunch of clients. So I have another 20 sites that I work with. So I probably have 40 development environments on my machine. And so Portainer is a tool that lets us look at the running containers on our machine and manage them with a graphic UI. So it's really easy to, like, where am I, what's happening? You just turn this thing on and it shows you what's happening. So there's my shout out for that. So you're gonna see a pattern here. We have 3 different tools, and you're gonna swear at the end that I just copy and pasted these slides, because they use the same conceptual framework for running these projects. You have an init file or a init command that's going to initiate and get this project running. You're going to have a start command to make it go. You're going to have a rebuild command. You're going to have a DB import command. They're all about the same. They might have a little bit of syntax things. They're all going to have a command line tool that is going to run drush or SQL or SSH. You're going to have an execute command to execute commands on the machine, and you're going to have a stop command. And you might have a system stop command. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I have a project. I'm going to show you guys from start to finish, getting this thing up and running, doing some changes, and then getting it going. So let's get started. Which one did I say first? Lando? Yep. So I just deleted my Lando file. Now I'm going to do Lando init. All right, and this is going to initialize. It's going to initialize my project. So I didn't give it any parameters, so now I can go ahead and pick. I'm going to do a Drupal 8. I'm going to give it the web root, which is web for this one. What do we want to call it? Get Jeff Lando. There you go, I'm up and running. All right, so what's it done? It's created a, this is the problem, I can't talk while I'm typing. So that's basically what it did. Created a YAML file with the name of the project, with the Drupal 8 recipe, and I put in the web root. Okay? I already have a settings file in this project under web, default. So here you can see it runs a Lando, and here are my database setups, right? So I have that on there, and if this all worked right, I can do Lando start. So it's going to start up a DNS service. It's going to start a container for the database and for the web. I got an internet connection. Ruh-roh. That's going to time out. That's okay. This will still work. And so since I had a file, I make a mistake. Yeah, there it is. All right. So I must have had this container there already that it has the database in it. So it found the database and it loads my website. All right. Let's go back and do a. I'm going to do a database import. DB import, okay. So this syntax is pretty easy. I just do DB import, DB SQL. Uh-oh. Let's see.
The file was named db.mysql.
There we go. Thank you. I changed that on my other ones. Sean gets a cookie. There we go. So DB, it's going to drop all my existing tables on my database. It's going to import the file. It'll give me some status at the end that it did that. There you go. All right. So now I can do Lando, drush ULI. What? That's not good, is it? Let's see if this is going. Okay, website is still there. So now I'm going to do a rebuild. Let's just see if that resolves the issues with my come on. Might be my internet connection. I grabbed the cable off this laptop and it seems to be glitchy. If you're starting this up for the first time, it'll pull these images. I have these images already, so it goes pretty fast. That looks better. Let's try this. Who knows what happened, right? I just did it again. It seems to be working. So I should have had Tim time this, right? But I went from Drupal install. I did Lando init. I have a running Drupal website on a Lando server. So that's bad. All right, let's extend this a little bit. Might run out of time, but let's try it anyway. I'm going to extend this, and I'm going to update the file. There we go. So let's add some things on here. I'm going to put in, I'm going to add mailhog. All right. So I'm going to go to my Lando file. And I'm going to set up Proxy. And I think this is wrong. All right, and then I'm going to tell it services. I'm going to give it a name and the port for that. Okay. I'm going to save that. Let's do one more thing. And let's add. Let me go back here and show you. In the status report, here we're running 7.1. So I'm just going to quickly change that to 7.2. I think I got to put that in quotes, right? Okay, so I've changed it to 7.2. I added mailhog. I'm going to save that. I'm going to run Lando restart. I'm actually going to run Lando restart. So it's going to kill the server. It's going to restart it. It's going to, I already had that container, but it's going to recreate one. It's going to keep my databases. But it will run a new container for PHP 7.2. There you go. So it's running 7.2 right now. And if I go here, is it Mailhog? Alright, my glitch might have... Oh, there it is. So now Mailhog is running. That's a program to listen into my email on the server. So just with a couple configs, I'm really extending my functionality of this, and it's ready to go. I can commit that Lando file to my repository. I can give this project to somebody else, and they can get started with this with Docker. Okay? Any questions about that? Cool. I'll stop Lando. I'll look at Portainer here, see what's running. I'm going to turn off the DNS for Lando. And let's get started on our next one.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is what you just did the same command as Lando power off?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, that's fine.
But you can find out. Same thing with ddev. I'm going to do the same thing here. Remember those patterns I talked about? ddev config, not ddev init. Start, import, describe, stop. So anybody have any questions? Put my command here, but I think it's going to be I hope that's right. So here I'm going to go through, it's going to ask me about my project. I'll do get Jeff Finn. It's going to be in the web directory. Now, this is what I like about this tool better, is that this configuration, if you guys can see that, is that it's looking in my folder, right? And it found a web directory, so it asked me if that's the default, and I say yes. It looks in my project, and it thinks that it's Drupal 8, but I have all these other recipes to pick. I didn't do that. All right? And so it defaults to Drupal 8, and I say yes. And just like that, I'm ready to go. It's making a configuration change in my host file, so it knows where to find that database. Oops. And I better not take that one away, right, Tim? So now it's created a instance, but it doesn't find the config file. Why not? let's see here.
You have to import the database, don't you?
But it should, here, shouldn't it say that it's, give me an SQL error because it's,
No, if the database exists and the connection exists,
yeah?
it will still attempt to connect. The problem is that if there are no tables in that database, then it will attempt to go through the install.
Got it.
So that's where you would do like the import.
I can't copy this command off this slide, sorry. So let's import the table. So the same thing, it'll truncate the database and then import it. All right. Exactly right. All right. So there I am, up and running. All right. So our commands are a little bit longer. With DDEV, we have to do an exec. So there you are, up and running and logged in. Okay. I had some other tricks. Let's keep going though. I'm running out of time. Any questions? Any observations? We're almost at time here. I want to leave room for questions if people had some.
How much of your computer resources are being taken up by these data components?
Not a lot. I just know that because it reuses those containers. Anybody have a better answer for that?
I would say if you're doing it in the Mac or Windows environment, there's a hidden VM underneath there, and when you pull down the Docker little whale up there, you can say how much memory to allocate to that VM, so it never takes up more than 2 gig of memory.
But does it always take up 2 gig if you?
Yeah,
2 gig?
the Docker, and that's a general Docker question. It's pretty much going to take up the 2 gig if you're saying Docker for Mac 2 gig. And
But I'm running Linux, so it's much.
So, yeah.
It's actually much less than that.
there, you can run all containers all day.
Yep. And I don't remember what the command is, but there's a Docker command that you can go up and clean up your old containers.
System prune.
System prune. And I ran that, and it gave me back like 4 gigs of data,
Yeah.
4 gigs of space. But like I say, I have like 40 environments, so it's really efficient, it seems.
On top of doing your containers, you also want to do your images, because your images store to your machine. So even though you get rid of your containers, the images still stay, and that's where most of the storage comes from.
Yep. Okay. 3:45. Anybody need to leave? Anybody have any questions? Let me do Fin quick, just because we can. So here's Doxil commands. Notice the pattern again, Fin and Ed. So instead of Doxil, right, Doxil's too long, so they use Fin. So Fin start, DB import, stop, drush, system stop. There's Fin stop, which just stops that container, and then there's system stop, which turns off the DNS, and there's another couple containers they run to get it going. So, nobody has any questions?
So how much experience do you have cross-platforming in your team? I'm trying to bring people up that are not Linux heads, and the slow Mac cross-file mounts and all that stuff is the pain point. How's that working out for you?
It's
On
been
the
great.
slow stuff. The Doxil, you think, is getting that handled better? Docs under VM.
Once you get it installed on your local machine,
Right.
once you get Docker running on your machine, the commands are transparent.
I just
It's
find
really
that,
transparent. So
You know, if you're mounting in with some of these other tools, you were saying the slow Mac
yep.
and Drupal 8, where you've got about 10,000 files in there, it's slow enough to be impediment. So saying, keep that actually tested on other people's platforms.
The folks that I work with are all on Macs. I'm the only
Yeah.
Linux guy. We don't have any Windows PCs. And we were fully on Lando, and we were like, this is it. And it was slow. And they tried Docker, and we changed everything over to Doxil because it was that much of a speed improvement for them. So it's significant. I know that Docker is working on solutions for that and trying to get that resolved. And almost all of these projects have said, right, that's not, I mean, we can
Yeah.
try and fix
Yeah.
this, but that's not our problem, right? It's something else, and that's where they're really going at it.
So if you have an excess of memory on your Mac, you can actually just create a RAM disk with part of that and put it there, and it's not an issue.
Boom, right?
And honestly, if all your code's inside the container, it's perfectly fast. It's the trying to have stuff that you're editing with your IDE in your native environment
Yep.
and running inside the container. That's where it gets slow.
Yeah. I'm running everybody run SSD drives, so that's gives you a lot of speed as well. So, all right. Let's see. I think that's right. Why didn't I put all the notes in here? All right, hold on. So, Doxil services weren't running, so it gets those started. Oh, do I have an error? Back to Portainer. Let's see what's happening. Oh yeah, sure, I got all this stuff running. And from here, I can just shut it all down. You're welcome to say, Wilbur, we have to go. You took too much time. Or you can just get up and walk out.
I think your session goes another 10 minutes over.
Yeah.
What does?
Yeah. It started 15 minutes later than.
They're an hour. The sessions are an hour long.
You gotta fill another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I got material.
Wilbur, you haven't filled up your hour yet, please.
I thought there'd be 15 minutes of really engaging questions. So, But it is the last session. Okay, so here is where we have to do a little patch this up. Put in
If you rebuilt from no Doxil directory at all, you'll need to set your doc root.
that's right.
The one
That's
thing
right.
that we unfortunately don't do. We don't.
And I have a strange doc root. If it was doc root, this would totally be okay though.
Yep.
Yep. You just got to ask that little question what the doc root is. And that would do it. You're totally right.
And then you have to actually run a fin restart so that it can rebuild the document root.
Got it. Who's using Docker containers? Who's thinking about it? Yeah. It's really helpful, especially getting people onboarded on a team. Shoot, if I got more time, then I'm going to keep going here. Let's see, I had a little tweak I was going to do. So let's do this. We'll change to 7.2. All right. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that in my YAML file, right? I'm going to rebuild my container.
You just do fin restart.
Aren't all these commands interchangeable between the three of them?
That's another problem.
Standardization.
And the package manager.
And there you go. It's already up and running on 7.2. So I had one more change. What was that? Did I delete my file? Come on! This is the funnest part of the whole demonstration. I want to have PHP MyAdmin running. Fin. Add-on. Install. PMA. Right? Is that the
Yeah.
code? Why didn't that get in my slide? Shoot. So what we've just done is used the tool to update our config file that'll run our project. It's even going to restart everything. So now I've just installed PHP MyAdmin as part of my install. And I'm going to show you this in the code. If you reload the Doxil YAML file, now you'll see, I didn't have a line feed here, I think, is that it added all this configuration automatically, restarted it, and now I have PHP MyAdmin. So if I go back here, there's PHP MyAdmin running with our database. So you can do this with a bunch of other services as well. So for us, Doxil is the winner, right? Because of the Mac speed performance. Also, the configuration is easy. Lando is good. I also really like DDev. If you really have somebody that's new and wants to get started, DDev is quick and easy, and you just run through the commands and it's boom, it's ready to go.
Is it UI now too?
What's that?
Is it UI now too, doesn't it?
It
Yes.
does?
Mm-hmm.
They just-
Wow.
It was.
So I know that when I went to Chicago to MidCamp, I did some core contribution work. They give you a DDev script on a thing, you plug it in your machine, and
Can you repeat what they
you're
said?
ready to start. What's that?
Can you repeat what they said?
Oh, DDev now has a UI to it.
UI.
Fair enough.
Yep. So they're all good, right? They really solve a lot of problems. They really make things portable for your team, and they really pack a lot of power.
I'm curious about pushing it. Well, I would comment on something Sean showed me this morning with Doxil and Fin Share. I mean, that may take care of my whole
Kinda
problem.
stole that from me.
But I'm curious most about pushing to production from each of these environments. If one makes it easier than another, or if there are requirements in there.
Yeah.
I've used Docker for Drupal for a long time.
Yep.
And the one gotcha in there is you can push to production, but it's complicated unless you subscribe to
To their-
Wallabies
To their service, right? Right.
and they take care of that.
And
I just wonder where.
that's their hook, right? That's what they're really about. That's I think where they're really monetizing
Right.
that product, right?
But
So-
these don't have
Yep.
that kind of a restriction on the.
I don't know the answer, and the reason why is that we already had an established process of going from our Git repository out to server through Pantheon, through Acquia, however we're doing that part of it. That was already done. In my mind, I think of this as the other way. We're taking this. We already have a repo with all the code in it. We have to work on that. How do I get it on my local machine? And this is like that process. And then we build the code and push it in the repo, and we just let that process go. We haven't done any of the. We do have. We have automated hooks to run Circle CI that runs a build. So we don't ever push anything to Pantheon anymore. Actually, we have a different repo, and then when we run that, and when all the Circle CI tests are good, when your code is okay, then that goes to Pantheon, and now you actually see it on the server. So it's only going to get more complicated, but at least this gets you a tool, some really good tools, some really good options for you to do local development on your own team. So, all right, great. Thanks everybody for listening, and thanks the DrupalCorn people for putting on a great camp. This is always a fun camp. Ever since I came and saw John down in the basement at the hotel with the crash course on Drupal 7. Remember when Drupal 7 started? I think that was the first DrupalCorn. It was like one day, one room.
So did you know that both the first DrupalCorn and the first DrupalCon were in humid, dank hotel basements?